Hey, welcome to another countdown to Outbound. I'm Mark Hunter, the sales hunter. I've got my cup of coffee. I'm ready to be drinking it this morning, along with Jim Karrh. Now, we're going to get him in the studio here in just a second, but I'll tell you what, Outbound tickets are going like crazy, both the in-person and online. So make sure you grab them. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the show. But hey, let's roll the opening video, and then we are going to get this guy on stage. Good morning, Jim, and welcome to the studio.
Good morning, Mark. Did someone mention a cup of coffee?
Yes, someone mentioned a cup, because you know what? You can never drink enough coffee. That's the way I look at it. Hey, you're part of Outbound this year. We'll talk about that in a bit, but let's talk. You really talk a lot about messaging. What's that mean? How do we up the game on message? Because you have a PhD. You know, I think you're the first speaker at Outbound with an with a doctorate degree.
And please don't hold that against me, because what we're going to be talking about is very practical. This is not very ivory towerish kind of material in the least. And in fact, Mark, for you and everyone that's listening into this, that your reps, your sales leaders, and you're thinking about how do we have the right kind of conversations, the ones that are valuable to me and valuable to my customers and my prospects. And one of the things that I think happens a lot, Mark, is that this whole concept of messaging feels very foggy and squishy. Some people will think, oh, we need a snappy pitch, or that's our tagline, or it's our mission statement or our vision statement or our backstory, whatever that is. I think for our purposes, and what I find to be most effective, Mark, is just think at the conversational level. Like, what do you actually say and see and show and do in conversations with prospects and customers? And then that becomes something that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with. They lack confidence. They know they have something really valuable to sell and really valuable to offer, but they're not quite sure how to talk about it. And so my approach to messaging and the kinds of work that I do is to say, let's get this a lot simpler. Let's get past our brains. Let's get past our industry. Let's get past any bad habits and simply be able to engage in really productive, valuable conversations.
Okay, now you're putting me in a fog bank with that, because you're saying get simple, just have a conversation. And it seemed like that should be simple. But you're right. People they lack confidence in that. I mean, that kind of blows my mind away, that people want to overcomplicate their messaging.
They do. And I don't know if you're a movie buff, Mark, but there is the movie Good Will Hunting. And there was a time where the Matt Damon character and the Robin Williams character, who is his therapist, and they were unpacking a whole lot of deep-seated psychological issues. And the line from the Robin Williams character was, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." And to a large degree, that lack of confidence, the frustration that many of us have with the messaging behind what we sell, isn't quite our fault. We've been, for example, told some things over time, at least many of us have, is that, well, the first thing we have to do is establish our credibility. We have to go in and we have to show them all our logos and tell them our backstory and tell them how great our stuff is. And that's not it. The other part is our industry may be getting in the way. So that over time becomes very techy, and people have acronyms and inside baseball types of language, and that gets in the way. So we have to put that aside. There's one other thing, Mark. Our brains get in the way. When I was doing research for my book, I learned that the parts of our brains that get activated when we talk about ourselves are the same parts of our brains that get activated when we have a great meal or think about sex or even take some psychedelic drugs. I know none of our listeners would know anything about that part. But
now we're getting somewhere with this conversation. So finally.
Now I'm not going to be talking about that specifically at Outbound, but the point is our brains are wired for comfort and pleasure, and it makes us comfortable to talk about ourselves and our stuff. So what we need is some motivation, and we also need a structure and some good habits to get past that. The great news, Mark, is we don't have to be perfect. If you're just better than the other guy, then you'll really stand out.
There's a line I love to use: a 2-watt light bulb looks good in a dark room. And you are spot on with that, because it is amazing how so many salespeople don't get it right. And what I find kind of surprising is we're still in this pandemic. It's still been we're still officially in a pandemic, and the last year has been absolutely crazy. And you would think that people have learned to be authentic and transparent, because I think that's what people want more than ever, because everybody's got a backstory. Everybody's been pushed to working from home. Lives have been turned upside down. And people are craving more than ever authenticity and transparency, which you would think that would help us in our messaging. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it is.
Well, there's a tug, I think, in two different directions. And we've got some of our outbound colleagues like a Larry Levine who are very good at reminding us about the value of authenticity. You talk about that a lot. And I think that is our intention, right? We want to be true to ourselves and we want to have good relationships and the like. But then there's this voice that's like, well, maybe my authentic self isn't quite good enough. Maybe I need to talk in a different way and put a little hyperbole on top of my message, or again, make it a little bit more about me, because going into other people's problems in areas where we can help and their own humanity it can seem really uncomfortable for us. But you don't have to be a brilliant conversationalist. Guess what? I'm not. Ask anybody. You don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to have great training in any of this. A lot of that can get in the way. I think sometimes we can know so much and feel so passionate about what we have to offer that throws us into that bad pattern. So the time we think about, Mark, what makes for a good conversation? Just in general, whether it's a personal conversation or a job interview or a sales conversation, it's roughly 50-50. It's a little give, a little take. You ask, you answer, and you speak in human terms. I think if we can take that natural gut about what makes for a good, valuable conversation that we might have with a friend and apply that into our selling conversations, again, you'll be more than a 2-watt light bulb in a dark room.
You had a drop the mic moment in there. And I call every interview I do, I call out to drop the mic. And that was to skip the hyperbole. And we have to get past that. And you really articulated that well. And wow, it is a shame, because I personally think we create much better dialogue when we take the time to listen to the customer and just let them drive the conversation. I know that's spooky for some people, but let them drive. I don't know. What are your thoughts on letting the customer drive the conversation?
I have a couple of thoughts just to keep in mind, and during Outbound and in all of our conversations, we'll dig a little more. But here's the first thing to keep in mind, and this is a little bit of researchy, but it's real life, Mark, is if you look at research, and there are people who do research into effective conversations and the ones that people feel the best about and find the most valuable, whether it be, again, job interviews or other conversations, we tend to find the other person to be brilliant if they're listening most of the time. If we had our conversation and Mark, you were asking me questions and doing some good active listening and reflecting things back to me, and somebody asked me later, how good a conversationalist is Mark Hunter? I'd say he's one of the best I've ever been around. He gets me, he knows his stuff, and it was just because of your discipline about listening. So know that in general, your selling conversations will be better. You will drive behavior to a better extent if you're actively listening more. Now, I think that doesn't mean a blank slate. And please, I'm pretty sure that this audience doesn't go around and just call people or knock on doors and say, what keeps you up at night? What's your pain? You don't want to go into it as a blank slate, but you can go in as someone who knows their stuff, knows their business, has a genuine interest in that prospect or that customer, and goes in with a good working hypothesis. And I think from that, then it really develops a good conversation, and people do want to tell you about themselves because their brains are firing that way too. And that way you get a great conversation.
I love what you said, that old question that people used to ask, what keeps you awake at night? And I think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, that was the question. But man, there's so much information out on everybody out on the internet, industry, companies, et cetera, that, like you said, if you can't develop a hypothesis going into the conversation, then probably you haven't done your homework and you haven't earned the right to have the conversation. Again, I think before any conversation takes place, there's a little bit of homework that has to be done. Now I gotta jump ahead something, because something intrigues me, because you have those letters after your name, PhD. What did you do your dissertation on?
Well, again, oftentimes we look back and our professional path doesn't quite match in a linear way what we're doing today. So I'm a recovering marketer who's applying a lot of what I've learned about from audiences and consumer psychology. I was a CMO for a while, and then for the past 12, 13 years, Mark, I've been working primarily with business selling teams, turning all that stuff into good conversations. So to go back to what my dissertation was on, pretty well disconnected, but if you know if you ever heard the term product placement, or I call brand placement. So if you had a name brand product, something with a logo that's in a TV show or a movie, or the clothes that they wear, the cars they drive. So I was trying to determine what audiences pay attention to. What do they remember about the stuff that their media characters were using, and did it have anything to do with purchase intention or them actually changing their behavior in any way?
Well, hey, I can relate to that, because I came out of the CPG industry, which people are going, what is that? That's the consumer packaged goods industry. So yeah, everything we sold had a logo on it, and product placement was a huge piece of what we did. So hey, I think this makes you coming into what we're doing, having a tremendous amount of insights because of that marketing piece, because you know how the message resonates, you know how the message plays out. Mm-hmm. So now what you're trying to do is come up and get to the voice. How do we create the voice? And there was something else that you said about whole listening thing. We don't have to do the talking. We really don't have to do the talking if we set the other person up right.
That's correct. And when I say one of the things when I'm working with clients, or when I'm talking to people who are reps, is this is manageable. You should have a plan. It doesn't have to be a script. Please, no, not a script, but a plan for your conversations. And that plan should be, you have some sort of opening, some sort of point of reference of where you believe you can be helpful. If there's any just mind piece that I try to keep in mind and that I recommend to others going into any conversation, is think, how can I be helpful? Sometimes you're getting a point of information. You're helping prospects sort through their options. Sometimes you're making a connection to somebody else in an important relationship. But what's really helpful? And so for being helpful, I think means being intentional about what you can offer that person, and a point of view that you can bring in. That's not about you, but it's about something that you know, and resources you can bring to bear that can help them with something that you believe is a priority for them. And that's where that good pre-call, pre-conversation planning comes in, Mark, is having a good sense of not only what you know, but how that can be valuable to that other person. And that should give you all the confidence in the world. The other thing that I have to remind a lot of really good sales reps about is, let's say you deal a lot with, say, financial buyers or people in the C-suite or general manager, whomever it is that you work with the most often. You have access to what a lot of that person's peers are doing, more so than even they have. And people are curious about what relevant others are doing. They're curious about what you're seeing in your conversations with their peers. And you can bring that into the conversation. That's naturally engaging. So just organize your plan in ways you can be helpful and informative to that prospect.
And I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning. It's just that relaxed conversation. That's what's so key. And I love the piece that you said, no scripts, because how can you have a casual conversation if you have a script? I equate a sales call a lot like to a football game. That first opening series might be scripted. The offense takes the field. Here's the series of plays we're going to run. But really after that, things begin to change depending on what they're seeing the defense doing, depending on what they see. And I think that's the way salespeople have to go in. They're prepared. They're prepared to go in many different directions, but they got to wait and see what the customer is doing. Hey, we're running out of time here in just a second, but Outbound is coming up in just a few weeks. You're going to be there. I'm looking forward to it. And Outbound tickets are available. Go to Outbound Conference. And what's your code, Jim?
My code, I believe, is Jim 100.
Well, you're not giving it out enough then. Okay.
I'm not giving, I should see, Mark, I was completely unprepared for this.
Okay.
I had not reviewed the insights that I wanted to bring. Folks, use Mark's code, whatever, just get there.
Hey, you
get there, participate in person, virtually, do that thing. That's more important than me, getting a star from Mark Hunter and Joe Blunt.
Well, it's okay. Hey, Jim 100, that saves you $100 on the ticket. Tickets in person and virtual, or you can use my code Mark 100. But hey, we do want to see you there at Outbound. Now we got to wrap this thing up here, but Jim, stick around, and I'm going to tell everybody else, stick around for the after the show because that's where we really get into some interesting stuff. We'll see you on the backside. Hey, that was a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I love talking about this, and I'm so excited because this is my first Outbound.
Well, it's good.
Not Outbound UV.
Well, hey, you know what? A lot of people, you know what's always surprising is the number of people who come back year in and year out. But I do have to bust your chops on knowing offhand. It's Jim 100. No, it's okay. It's okay.
I was thinking for a moment, like, I don't think the code has my last name in it because no one can spell my last name. So I stumbled on that. My authentic self came through, and my bad memory, and that I hadn't written the note down. So please forgive me, everyone.
Yeah, I've misspelled your last name more than a few times. It has an extra R in it. Okay, what ancestor put that in there?
Well, there are at least 2 different stories in the family tribe, so at least one is wrong, maybe both. So some say it's Scott-Irish, some say it's German, but I've had people who know German well and say, well, there's no silent H. And so maybe it was Karrh many generations ago, and it got chopped off. I don't know. The branding was given to me, and Mark, it's been suggested that I buy a vowel, but I don't see any need at this point.
No, I don't think you need to buy a vowel. You could just be Jim, the Ph.D. How's that sound?
Just Jim. That's why I just say manage the message. You can remember that part.
Manage the. You know what? I'll tell you what. That's a hashtag. Manage the message.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. So anyway, hey, we need to run. We are at 22 minutes. So hey, it's been great catching up with you. Thank you so much. And say hi to Daryl if you see him.
I will. Thank you so much, Mark, and everyone.
And we're going to give a big shout out here to VanillaSoft as our title sponsor. Thank you, VanillaSoft, because without you and Connect and Sell, there's no way Outbound would be possible. Take care.